To rig up a head for character animation or for a head turn after all of your layers of artwork are created requires us to do some layer reordering, some layer nudging, setting up cutter effects. So we'll be using the cutter. And once we have all of those items situated, we will be able to then animate a character and even simulate the turning of a head by repositioning facial features instead of having to redraw artwork frame by frame, which can be a way of speeding up the animation process. Two housekeeping issues is first, in the preferences, to make certain under general that the focus on mouse enter is checked, so that is active. We want, as we move from different boxes or different windows, for the focus to change. That becomes necessary to change the nudge or layer order of our artwork layers so that we don't have to move the layers down here, but we can change their Z sorting or their Z index to control which layer shows up on top of each other versus how they are organized in our layer palette. Item of housekeeping we want to take care of is to turn off animate, because otherwise any layer rearrangements that we do will cause keyframes, but that will make them not permanent. Now the nice part is, knowing that that causes keyframes, it becomes possible when we are animating, then we can change which arm or which leg is on top through a layer nudge, and it's only keyframed. It's not structurally embedded into our document. So that is a good thing. But while we are getting the whole document organized, it is important to make sure animate is turned off. And then we will use the transform tool and have that active. We will need this window active when we start nudging our layers. So as I look at all of these layers, I have a body layer, a head layer, mouth, nose, etc. I want the head layer to control all of the pieces that are part of the head. So to do that, I am going to drag head to the top of the stack so it's where I want it to be. When I pull it up top, we notice that now it covers up everything else, so that's not ideal. Then what I want to do is to select all of the layers that will be part of the head, and I will drag them onto the head so they are now children of the head. So that if I select the head, it selects all of the parts that are attached to it. So that if I move the head, all of those pieces move. Now the problem is all of those pieces are now behind the head because the head is considered the topmost element. So now I need to do my layer nudge. And the nudge happens by making sure I have my animate button off, my transform tool selected, highlight all the layers that I wish to nudge. And in this case, I want to nudge every layer except the back hair, because I don't want the back hair to be on top of the head. I want it to be behind. That gives me some flexibility while I'm animating the hair. I have the head artwork. It will be sandwiched between the hair that's on top of the head and the hair that's behind the head. So I will deselect that layer by holding down the Command key so I can deselect hair back. And now with the remaining layers selected, I move my mouse into my camera window, so the camera window where the artwork is, hold down the Option key, and then hit the down arrow. Down arrow pulls things forward in space. Up arrow will push them back, and we will be doing some of each as part of this character. So Option, down arrow, and now it pulled all of those layers on top. Now I do see that one layer I wish to push back is going to be the right ear, because I want the right ear to sit behind the head, since this head is kind of in a somewhat of a 3/4-ish view. It's a little turned from front. So with that layer selected, hold down Option and hit the up arrow, and we'll see it went back. Now I want to take the hair and send that back as well, so that the hair is the furthest back, then I have the ear, then I have the head, then I have all of the stuff that's on top of the head. And in doing that, it will allow me to have my layers nicely organized. The cutter, so that we can animate the eyes within the cutter space, what I will do is I will select an eye, click plus, effects, cutter. Select the next right iris, plus, effects, cutter. So the left iris and the right iris will have a cutter attached to them. On the cutter layer with the little star where it says cutter, you click the plus and now it says drop layer here. For the left iris, I will drag over left eye cutter. For the right iris, I will drag over right eye cutter. Now the cutter is simply a copy of the white of the eye that was on the right eye or left eye layers respectively. So that's what the cutter artwork came from. So if I turn off the eye layer, well, now with cutter on we don't get to see it. Let me turn off the cutter. So we'll see I turned off the eye layer, so we have the iris, but we can see the white of the eye if I turn off the right iris as well. So the cutter itself, the right cutter, is just that white artwork, and that was copied from the right eye layer. So let's see, right eye cutter, drag that down. So we have left eye cutter, right eye cutter, and now currently it's cutting inverse of what we want. So I need to double click on the star and say I want to invert my cutter. And repeat the process. We'll click the star, invert the cutter, then it works.
That cutter making it a child of
the cutters have been attached to each iris using the eyes. Then we will see that we are in better shape. Now the right eyebrow, I have the right eyebrow and the left eyebrow, and I want all of my left to be on top of the right. So I want to take the right eyebrow and pull that down in my layer stack. So I have a left eyebrow, a left eye cutter, then the left iris with its where it's been cut out, then right eyebrow, right eye cutter, right iris, then we have a right eye, then a left eye. Now the left eye, I want to pull that up. So I have all of my left eye pieces in one place, all of my right eye pieces in one place. The next thing that we could do is we could add a peg that would control all of these eye pieces, the eyebrow and the rest of the eye parts, or we can make the rest of the eye a child of the eyebrow. If we know that we will never change or manipulate the eyebrow except moving it as part of the eye group, then we can use the eyebrow as a de facto control peg for the rest of the left eye elements. Because when I'm animating, I don't want to have to move the eyebrow, then move the eye, then move the iris. I want to be able to grab one thing and move the whole eye as a group. When we're doing that, that's really where a peg comes in handy. But I could, if the eyebrow, if I wanted to change, I would assume I'm just going to draw new artwork for different expressions. So I could then move the rest of these pieces in as a child of the eyebrow. Or I could add a peg that all of these items, so one peg for the left eye, one for the right eye, would be children of that peg. Both are completely valid ways of working with it. So to do that, because last time we did all parent-child, this time I'm going to add a peg. And this, I have the left eyebrow selected, so then I see how it says left eyebrow -P. But I'm just going to change this to my left eye P because it's going to be all of the eye parts in a moment, because I will drag the rest of the eye elements to that eye organization. So now I have my left eye peg, left eyebrow, the eye cutter, left iris, and left eye artwork all as part of that peg. I can repeat that now for the right eye, or I could make everything a child of the right eye's eyebrow. Again, there is not, you can make arguments to support both ways of working with it. A lot of how you start to rig or organize a character becomes personal preference as you work through what you are trying to do. So now I can select one eye, select the other eye. I can select an ear, I can select the other ear. Now I have the nose here. The nose is below the right eye. So I could nudge the layers, or I could reposition the nose so that its layer is in a different position, because we can see right now while I'm animating how the nose can go behind the eye, and well, that's just not going to be acceptable. To fix the nose so that it doesn't do this, I can nudge the nose, but this is an occasion where the nose is really just going to sit between the eye layers, so that if I animate the eye, we'll see how the nose can now go behind it. We can use that to create a sense of space or dimension on our character. The mouth is good where it's at. At this point, I pretty much have the head situated, and what I want to do is to attach a peg to the head. So with the head selected, I will then add in a peg layer, can collapse on the head. So now my head is ready to animate. I will notice that if I wish to animate the head, my pivot point, I should move that. The best way to make a permanent pivot point change is to use the rotate animation tool. If you don't see that showing up on your top toolbar, right click and choose advanced animation. So right click advanced animation, we get the animation tools. I want the rotate tool, and I want to put my rotation point at the base of the chin so that the head can move. You can see if I go too far, there's failure of artwork that needs to be taken into account. So if the head is going to move that far, I probably need to rotate the body as well. And if we're going to be doing that, what we may want to do is to add a peg to the head. We could add a peg to the head and body, so we can now move this, and that'd be our master peg. So now if I add in an additional peg, this would be my master peg. And for this master peg, what I will want to do is to not stick it inside the head, but I will drag the head and the body, I missed again, and drag the body onto my master peg, and then adjust the sequence so that the body will be on top. So we have the head will be on top of the body. So now I have a master peg. The original drawing layer was just an initial sketch to plan out how to create the rest of the artwork. That can go away. So now I have a character ready to animate. Master pegs are typically on a whole character. You put it down at the base of the feet so that you can rotate your character appropriately on screen. So if I pull that down now when I rotate, I have some latitude of how to move the character, so I can rotate the whole body. Then I can work my way up the food chain. Remembering that we can use B and Shift B to start navigating down through elements. So if I hit escape, click on an eyeball, and hit B to go up, oh, not twice, to go up the food chain. So if I hit B, it now allows me to select the eye element, and I can work with that. So if we look at our selection under head, we'll see how that chose the left eye peg. So using B and Shift B allows us to move up and down this hierarchy without having to have our layers expanded, which can be an advantage when we are animating. Though I used pegs I put a peg on the eye, peg on the other eye, peg on the head, we have a master peg. I think if we're not using a node view where we have pegs on everything, it is better to minimize the usage of pegs except for a master peg, one per character, unless the situation really requires you to do that. So as I look at my layers as I have them set up, I am going to remove the pegs that are here. So if I click on this peg and hit delete, or click on the minus with the peg to make the peg go away, it gets rid of everything on that layer, and that's not what we want. So what we need to do is, the first step is to remove these elements from the peg so they're not a child of the peg. So I will drag them out from the peg. So now the peg has been separated. We'll find the peg is floating around somewhere else. So now I can get rid of that peg since there's no children attached to it with impunity. Now if I go to the left eyebrow, we'll see we have the cutter, the iris, and the eye. So I want to choose the cutter, iris, and eye. I drag those onto the eyebrow, and that makes them a child of my eyebrow. That will make animating a little bit easier when I use the animation tool. If I click on the eyebrow, it will select all of the eyes, so I can move the whole eye as a group. If I do wish to move the eyebrow as an individual element, then I will need to expand out my layers to be able to select just the eyebrow and nudge that separately from the other elements. But because generally I will want the eyebrow to go with, and I would rather just have individual artwork like a blinking eye or a changing mouth or hand, so I have additional drawings for the eyebrow versus transforming it, then that allows me to have this as my setup. So again, if I take the layers that are part of that right eye peg, drag those out, and now I have the mouth, which apparently got items attached to that. We'll drag that out as well because I don't want all of these extra pegs. So I will then get rid of these pegs that I'm no longer using. So I have hair, I have my eye elements that I will add. It's much easier to add them as a group to the eyebrow, so then they maintain their order, their layer order. So I have mouth, right eye, nose, left eye, left ear, right ear, hair, hair back, and bangs. That's all part of the head. So if I select the head, that chooses everything. Now when I do that, I can see that the head pivot point is in the center. I want to again put the pivot point down near the chin as a way to give me a little better control while I am animating. Now if I don't want to use a head peg and just want to have the head under the master peg, so I have head and body separate without extra pegs, can drag that up. We'll see how it now inherited the rotation of the master peg. Delete the offending peg. So now we just have a head here. We have the body. The body, I will want to modify the body's registration point. I'll just put it at the base of the body. And then I have my master peg. So now if I rotate, I can tilt it upright. I can go to the body. Now the body will probably not want to move the body without moving the head too often. So if we're trying to move the body, we'll probably want to just grab the master peg so that as I move the body, the head is moving with it. So I could have a character appearing to walk in. And if I want to then go to the head, Shift B brings me down to the head. And then if I want to rotate, I can rotate. Again, being careful not to go too far. We can pull the head down, shortening the neck if we want, which does give us a little more latitude on the rotation. So we can have a head dancing character. And that gets us ready to start animating a simulated partial head turn through sliding the features of the face. To do my simulated turn of the head, I am going to click in frame 1, turn on animation. Notice how everything went from red to yellow. Yellow means we're now ready to animate. I'm in frame 1. I've collapsed all my layers underneath my master peg, and I will hit F6 to add in a keyframe. If I extend it out, we'll see all of my layers now have been keyframed. Now that I have done that, I can now move over. Doesn't really matter how far I go, but if I just go to the end of my timeline and hit F5 on the keyboard to extend it out, so I've extended my exposure. Clicking at frame 10, I am going to then click on I want to just choose the head. Okay, it did select it. The color threw me off there, so I've chosen the head here. Now if I don't want just the head, if I just want to say grab one eye, the other eye, the nose, and the mouth, if I use the arrow keys, I can move them over to the side of the face. So if the head is turning to this right side, then the ear will start sliding back, this ear will start sliding forward, and I'm using my arrow keys to simulate this. Now what I may want to do is to take the right eye and hold down Shift, shrink it down a little bit. It was too big to begin with, so it needed to shrink down. And as I can see, I've forgotten to put the nose layer on top. So I do need to bring the nose on top of that eye. So if I look here, we have the nose, but I need to nudge that on top. I'm going to temporarily turn off Animate to make this a permanent change. And then with my cursor in the camera window, hold down Option, hit down arrow until it sits on top of the eye. And I'll turn back on Animate. So we'll see now that eye change is probably too dramatic because I should have, I think, shrunk it down a little bit at the beginning as well. So we'll shrink it. So now we start to see the features moving over as it moves over. And I want to grab the other eye and pull that one as it will get a little closer to the nose. And then I can see how my animation is starting to take shape. It was a little too far initially with the move. So just by moving the ears, moving the eyes, nose, and mouth around, we're able to start to create an illusion, an impression of the turn of the head. Now I could change the hair a little bit. slide it around. And as we do this, we're able to start to create some illusion of movement within our project. Now, I did forget when I started doing the movement, that second time I forgot to keyframe everything. It's always a good idea every time you're going to do a movement, move to that point in time and hit F6, keyframe it, so that that change takes effect. So if I move out here again, F6, if I want to rotate the head back. So this type of movement gives us limited capabilities with what we're doing, but it can be really impressive if we pull it off. Now, if I take the nose and go too far over, we'll see how the nose can stick out, but a problem that I'm going to run into if I try to animate too far off of my artwork is that the eye is going to stick out of the head. So with that happening, we may need to add in an additional cutter that would be for the shape of the head. That would allow, as the eye moves to the side, that it trims or cuts the same way that it's cutting the iris and the pupil with the eye shape. We can use the head as a cutting element as well.